Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, Chapter 12. As Eleanor and Marianne were walking together the next morning, the latter communicated a piece of information to her sister in which, of all the spite and she knew before Marianne's imprudence of want and thought, surprised her by its extravagant testimony of both. Marianne told her with the greatest delight that Willoughby had given her a horse, one that he had bred himself on his estate in Somersetshire, and which was exactly calculated to carry a woman, without considering that it was not in her mother's plan to keep any horse, that if she were to alter her resolution in favor of this gift, she must buy another for the servant, and keep a servant to ride it, and after all, build a stable to receive them. She had accepted the present without hesitation, and told her sister of it in raptures. He intends to send his groom into Somersetshire immediately for it, she added, and when it arrives, we will ride every day. You shall share its use with me. Imagine to yourself, my dear Eleanor, the delight of a gallop in some of these downs. Most unwillingly was she to awaken from such a dream of felicity to comprehend all the unhappy truths which attended affair, and for some time she refused to submit to them. As to an additional servant, the expense would be a trifle. Mamma, she was sure, would never object to it, and of any horse would do for him. He might always get one at the park. As to stable, the merest shed would be sufficient. Eleanor then ventured to doubt that the propriety of receiving such a present from a man so little, or at least so little known to her, was too much. You are mistaken, Eleanor, she said warmly, in supposing I know very little of Willoughby. I have not known him long indeed, but I am in a mix of better acquaintance with him than any other creature in the world, except yourself and mamma. It is not time or opportunity that this is to determine intimacy and its disposition alone. 7 years would be sufficient to make some people acquainted with each other, and 7 days are more than enough for others. I should hold myself guilty of the greater impropriety of accepting a horse from my brother than from Willoughby. Oh, John, I know very little, though we have lived together for years, but of Willoughby my judgment has no longer been formed. Eleanor thought it was wisest to touch that point no more. She knew her sister's temper. Opposition on so tender a subject would only attach her to the more of her own opinion. But by appeal to her affection and her mother, by presenting the inconveniences that were indulgent in the mother, drew herself, as if it would probably be the case, she consented to this new increase of establishment. Marianne was shortly subdued, and she promised not to tempt her mother of such imprudent kindness in the mentioning of the offer, and to tell Willoughby, when she saw him next, that that it must be declined. She was faithful to her word, and when Willoughby called at the cottage on the same day, Eleanor heard the expression of disappointment in him in a low voice. On being obliged to forego the acceptance of his presents, the reason for the alteration were at the same time related. They were such to make further entreaty on the side of impossible. His concern, however, was very apparent, and after expressing it with earnestness, he added to the same low voice, "But Marianne, the horse is still yours. Though you cannot use it now, I shall keep it only until you can claim it. When you leave for Barton to reform your own establishment in a more lasting home, Queen Mab shall receive you." This was overheard by Miss Dashwood, and the whole of the sentence is a manner of producing it in the addressing of her sister in the sentence. By her Christian name alone, she instantly saw an intimacy so decided, a meaning so direct, that as marked perfect agreement between them. From that moment she doubted not only their being engaged to each other, and that the belief of the creatures were no surprise, or that she or any of her friends should be left any temper so frank to discover it by accident. Margaret related something to her the next day which placed this matter in a still clearer light. Willoughby had spent the preceding evening with them and Margaret by being left alone in some time in the parlor with only him and Marianne. He had the opportunity for observations which the most important face she communicated with her eldest sister when they were next by themselves. "Oh, Eleanor," she cried, "I have such a secret to tell you about Marianne. I am sure she will be married to Mr. Willoughby very soon." "You have so," Eleanor replied, "almost every day since the first met on High Church Down, and then they had not known each other a week. I believe for you were certain that Marianne wore his picture around her neck, but it turned out to be the only miniature of our great uncle. But indeed, this is quite another thing. I am sure that they will be married very soon, for he has got a lock of her hair. Take care, Margaret. It may be the only thing of hair of some great uncle of his. But indeed, Eleanor, it is Marianne's. I am almost sure of it, for I saw him cut it off last night after tea, when you and Mamma went out of the room. They were whispering and talking to each other as if it could be fast, and it seemed to be begging of something of her. And presently he took her up a scissors to cut off her lock of hair, for it was tumbled down on her back, and he kissed it and folded it up on a piece of white paper and put it into his pocket. From such particulars, seated on such an authority, Eleanor could not be without her credit, nor she was disposed of it, and the circumstances, as it was, perfect unison with what she had heard of herself. Margaret's sagacity of this not always display of, in a way, such so satisfactory that her sister, when Mrs. Jennings attacked her one evening in the park, to give her the name of a young man who was Eleanor's particular favorite, which had been a long matter of great curiosity to her, Margaret answered by looking at her sister and saying, "I must not tell, may I, Eleanor?" This, of course, made everybody laugh, and Eleanor tried to laugh too, but the effort was painful. She had conceived that Margaret had fixed on a person whose name she could not bear with composure, to become a standing joke with Miss Jennings. Marianne felt for her most sincerely, but she did not so harm than a good cause of turning very red and saying in an angry manner to Margaret, "Remember that whatever your conjectures may be, you have no right to repeat them." "I never had any conjectures about it," replied Margaret. "It was you who told me of it yourself." This increased the mirth of the company, and Margaret was eagerly pressed to say something more. "Oh, pray, Miss Margaret, let us know all about it," said Miss Jennings. "What is the gentleman's name?" "I must not tell Mamma, but I know very well that it is, and I know where he is, too." Yes, we can guess where he is, at his own house at Norland, to be sure. He is the curator of this parish, I dare say." "No, that he is not. He is of no profession at all." "Margaret," said Marianne without great warmth, "you know that all of this is an invention of your own, and that there is no such person in existence." "Well, then," he said, "he is lately dead, Marianne, for I am sure that there was such a man of once, and his name begins with an F." Most grateful did Eleanor feel to Lady Middleton for observing this at this moment, that it rained very hard, though she believed to be an interruption, to process less of the attention of her than from her ladyship's great dislike of all of their such an elegance in subjects of raillery and the delight of her husband and mother. The idea, however, started by her, was immediately pursued by Colonel Brandon, who was on every occasion mindful on the feelings of others, and much said on the subject of rain in both of them. Willoughby opened the pianoforte and asked Marianne to sit down in it, and thus, amidst the various endeavors of different people to quit the topic, it fell to the ground, but not so easily did Eleanor recover from the alarm of which it had thrown her. A party was formed that evening for going on with the following day, and to see a very fine place about 12 miles from Barton, belonging to a brother-in-law of Colonel Brandon, without whose interest it could not be seen, as a proprietor, who was then abroad, had left strict orders on that head. The grounds were declared to be highly beautiful, and Sir John, who was particularly warm in their praise, might be allowed to be a tolerable judge, for he was formed in parties to visit them at least every twice night in the summer for at least 10 years. They contained a noble piece of water, a sail on which to form a great part of the morning's amusement. Cold provisions were to be taken, open carriages only to be employed, and everything conducted in the usual style of complete party of pleasure. To some few of the company it appeared rather to be bold undertaking, considering that time of year, and though it had rained every day for the last fortnight, and Mrs. Dashwood, who had already cold, was persuaded by Eleanor to stay home.